The man in the lobby,
need to leave this
no
area
one
right
noticed him
now,
at
sir.
first.
I am
And that
not
was
going
exactly how he
anywhere
wanted
until I
it.
see the
The
manager.
hotel lobby was everything modern luxury had become polished marble floors that reflected the ceiling, lights like still water. A chandelier that looked more like floating crystal clouds than glass, and a front desk staffed by people trained to smile before a guest even finished speaking. Soft piano music drifted through the air, the kind designed to make money feel calm and important at the same time. Guests moved in confident lines, rolling suitcases that cost more than some people's cars, wearing tailored coats and watches that whispered status instead of shouting it. And then there was him. He stepped inside quietly, dressed in a worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and boots that had clearly walked through more airports than red carpets. His hair was a little messy, his beard untrimmed, his shoulders relaxed in a way that suggested he wasn't trying to impress anyone. In his hand was a small overnight bag, simple and unbranded. No entourage, no assistant, no security. Just a man who looked like he had nowhere urgent to be. A few heads turned, but only briefly, not because he looked important, but because he'd in single quotes at the front desk. A young concierge glanced up, then down again, her eyes already calculating. She had been trained to recognize luxury, and this man did not match the pattern. Her smile, polite at first, tightened slightly. She leaned toward her colleague and whispered something, her eyes flicking back toward him. The second employee followed her gaze, raising an eyebrow before nodding knowingly. The man waited patiently, standing off to the side as a couple in designer coats finished checking in. He didn't sigh. He didn't check his phone. He simply watched the lobby with quiet curiosity, as if he were studying a place that meant something to him on a deeper level than anyone realized. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward. "Good evening," he said gently. The concierge smiled, but it was the kind of smile that ended at the lips. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" "Yes," he replied. "Under my name." She tapped at the keyboard quickly, eyes scanning the screen. Her expression shifted not to recognition, but to confusion. "I'm not seeing it," she said. "Are you sure this is the correct hotel?" He nodded. "I'm sure." She looked him up and down now, no longer subtle about it. The jacket, the boots, the bag. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. "This is a private luxury property," she said carefully. "Rooms here are quite expensive." The words landed softly, but the meaning underneath them was sharp. The man smiled, not offended, not defensive, just calm. "I understand," he said. Behind him, a well-dressed guest shifted impatiently, clearly annoyed at the delay. Another staff member, taller, older, wearing a manager's badge, approached, his expression already prepared for trouble. "Is there a problem?" the manager asked. The concierge gestured toward the man. "He says he has a reservation, but I can't find it." "And he doesn't seem to have the confirmation details." The manager looked at the man, his eyes sweeping over him in a single practiced scan. His tone changed immediately. "Sir," he said, voice firm but cold, "this hotel caters to a specific clientele. If you're looking for more affordable accommodation, there are several options a few blocks away." The lobby went quiet in a subtle way, the way rooms do when something uncomfortable is happening but no one wants to admit they're watching. The man did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He did not explain himself. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and said, "Would it be all right if I waited here for a moment?" The manager hesitated. "I'm afraid loitering isn't permitted." That was when something shifted. Not in the man, but in the atmosphere. From across the lobby, a senior staff member froze mid-step. Her eyes widened. She stared at the man like she was seeing a ghost, then looked again. As if her mind needed confirmation, she hurried over, her heels clicking too loudly against the marble. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. She turned to the manager first. "Do you know who this is?" The manager frowned. She didn't wait for his answer. She turned to the man, her posture suddenly respectful. "Almost reverent, sir," she said quietly. "I didn't realize you were arriving today." The concierge's face drained of color. The manager blinked. "Arriving today." The man smiled again, that same gentle expression. I came in early. I wanted to see how things were running. Silence fell like a dropped glass. The senior staff member swallowed. Of course. Everything is prepared. The manager's mouth opened, then closed. Only then did it begin to dawn on them slowly, painfully, that something was very wrong with their assumptions, because the man standing in front of them wasn't. Guessed he wasn't lost, he wasn't poor, he was the owner. In this hotel, every shining floor, every chandelier, every polished surface belonged to him. But he said none of that out loud, not yet. He simply picked up his bag and said, "Please don't apologize. I came tonight to listen." And as the lobby staff stood frozen, realizing their mistake far too late, one truth became unavoidable. The test had already begun. The lobby slowly returned to motion, but something invisible had shifted in the air. Like a storm that hadn't broken yet but promised it soon would. Guests continued to pass through, suitcases rolling, voices murmuring, the piano resuming its gentle rhythm. Yet every staff member who had witnessed the exchange felt the weight of it pressing against their chest. The man stood calmly beside the front desk, his presence suddenly impossible to ignore, not because he demanded attention, but because the truth of who he was had begun to settle in ways that made people uncomfortable with themselves. He did not announce his ownership, did not raise his voice, did not correct anyone harshly. Instead, he chose silence. And in that silence, he began to see everything. He asked for no special treatment as he was escorted toward a seating area near the windows overlooking the city lights. From there, he could see the entire lobby unfold like a stage play that no one realized was being watched by its author. Staff members moved with practiced smiles, but now those smiles faltered when they passed him. Some avoided eye contact altogether, pretending to be suddenly busy. Others glanced his way repeatedly, fear flickering behind their professionalism. He sat there quietly, hands resting on his knees, observing not just what people did, but how they did it when they thought no one important was looking. It was the same reason he had invested in places like this in the first place, not for profit alone, but to understand how people treated one another when power was uneven, near the entrance. A family entered hesitantly, their clothes neat but clearly worn, their movements unsure in a space that felt too polished for them. The father clutched a folded piece of paper, the mother whispered reassurances to their young daughter, who stared wide-eyed at the chandelier above. The concierge from earlier stiffened almost immediately, her smile tightening again, her posture subtly defensive. She leaned toward her colleague, whispering something that made them both glance, toward the family with thinly veiled impatience. The man by the window noticed everything, from the way the father hesitated before approaching the desk, to the way the mother instinctively stepped back, as if already bracing for rejection. The interaction unfolded exactly as he feared it would. The questions were sharper, the tone colder, the patience shorter. The family tried to explain, voices soft, apologetic, but the concierge interrupted them twice, her fingers tapping the desk in irritation. The manager hovered nearby, arms crossed, watching not with concern, but with suspicion. From his seat, the man felt something tighten in his chest, not anger, not yet, but disappointment, deep and heavy. This hotel had been built on the idea of dignity, on the belief that luxury should never erase humanity. Somewhere along the way, that belief had been replaced by assumptions. He stood slowly, deliberately, not rushing, and walked closer, stopping just far enough away to remain unnoticed. The concierge finally dismissed the family with a practiced phrase about policies and availability, her smile returning the moment they stepped away, defeated. The young girl looked back once, confusion written across her face, before following her parents out into the night. The man remained still, staring at the door long after it closed, his jaw set, his eyes distant. He had seen this before, in different forms, in different cities, in different industries. The problem was never one bad employee. It was culture. It was what people were allowed to believe when no one challenged them. He returned to his seat, pulling a small notebook from his jacket pocket. The notebook was worn, its pages filled with careful handwriting. Observations from places he had visited anonymously over the years. He wrote slowly, not names yet, just moments, behaviors, decisions. He believed deeply that people should be judged, not by their best performances, but by how they treated others when kindness cost them something. Around him, the staff continued working, unaware that every interaction was being weighed, not by wealth or status, but by empathy. Later that evening, a junior housekeeping staff member accidentally bumped into a guest near the elevators, dropping a stack of freshly folded towels. The guest snapped immediately, his voice sharp and humiliating, drawing attention from nearby guests. The staff member froze, apologizing repeatedly, her face flushing with embarrassment. The supervisor approached, not to defend her, but to scold her in front of everyone, her words cutting deeper than the guests. That was when the man stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Slicing cleanly through the tension without raising volume or authority. "That's enough," he said. Everyone turned. The supervisor opened her mouth to object, then stopped when she recognized him fully now. Not as a rumor, not as a possibility, but as reality standing inches away. The silence that followed was absolute. The man knelt down, helping the young staff member gather the towels himself. His movements slow and deliberate, his presence grounding. "Mistakes happen," he said gently, meeting her eyes. "What matters is how we respond to them." He stood, turning to the guest, his expression composed but unwavering. "And respect is not optional here. No shouting, no threats. Just truth delivered without cruelty." The guest muttered an apology and walked away. The supervisor's hands trembled slightly as she nodded, understanding dawning in painful clarity. As the man returned to his seat, the lobby felt different again. Not calmer, but heavier with realization. Whispers spread quietly among the staff. The story of who he was moved faster than any announcement ever could. Some felt shame. Some felt fear. A few felt something else entirely, a chance to be better. He looked around one last time that night, the city lights reflecting in his eyes, and closed his notebook. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. Because he hadn't come to punish, he had come to change everything. Morning arrived quietly, but the hotel did not wake the same way it always had. There was no announcement, no official memo, no dramatic gathering in the lobby. Yet something unmistakable lingered in the air, like the echo of a truth that could no longer be ignored. Staff members moved with careful precision, conversations hushed, smiles restrained not by professionalism but by self-awareness. Everyone knew who had walked among them the night before, not as an owner demanding respect, but as a mirror reflecting who they were when they believed no one powerful was watching. The man himself appeared early, dressed the same way as before, blending once again into the architecture of the place he had built. Except now, his presence carried weight that bent the atmosphere around him. He began his day not in an executive office, but in the break rooms. The service corridors, the quiet spaces guests never saw. He listened more than he spoke, asking simple questions that opened doors people had kept locked, even from themselves. How long had they worked here? What they loved about their job? What made it hard? Some answers came cautiously at first, shaped by fear. But as word spread that no one was being punished for honesty, voices grew steadier. A bellhop admitted he had learned quickly that kindness depended on the clothes someone wore. A concierge confessed she had been trained to prioritize guests who looked important, because those were the ones who complained loudest and tipped best. A junior staff member spoke softly about the humiliation she felt daily, not from guests, but from supervisors who believed authority required distance, not empathy. The man listened without interruption, his face calm but intent, as if each word mattered deeply, because to him it did. He took notes again, not to build a case against individuals, but to map a pattern that had quietly taken root over years. Systems, he knew, were far more dangerous than people, because systems taught good people how to justify bad behavior. Somewhere between efficiency and exclusivity, the soul of the place had been misplaced. The hotel had become a performance instead of a sanctuary, a stage where worth was measured by appearance instead of humanity. Later that afternoon, he asked for a meeting. not in the grand conference hall with its long table and polished screens, but in the staff dining area, where chairs mismatched and walls carried the marks of real use. Managers, supervisors, and department heads gathered reluctantly, their confidence stripped bare by uncertainty. Some sat stiffly, arms crossed, ready to defend themselves. Others stared at the floor, already knowing the truth would be uncomfortable. The man stood at the front, hands folded loosely, his voice steady and unhurried when he finally spoke. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," he said, looking at each face slowly, deliberately. "I came because I wanted to understand who we are when we think status gives us permission." No one interrupted. "I watched how guests were treated," he continued. "But more importantly, I watched how you treated each other. And what I saw wasn't cruelty. It was something worse. It was normalization." A murmur moved through the room. Not disagreement, but recognition. He spoke about the family turned away, not accusing, but recounting. Describing the daughter's face, the father's hesitation. The quiet defeat that settled in the room when empathy was denied. He spoke about the housekeeper scolded publicly, about how humiliation had been disguised as discipline. Each example landed gently, yet impossibly heavy, because no names were needed. Everyone knew where they had stood in those moments, whether by action or silence. "This place was built on a simple promise," he said. "That dignity is not earned by wealth. It is a right." The words sank deep. One by one, people began to speak. A supervisor admitted she had mirrored the behavior of those above her, believing leadership meant control. A manager confessed he had stopped seeing individuals, seeing only categories instead. The concierge, from the first night, finally stood, her voice trembling, tears streaking the careful professionalism she had worn like armor. She spoke about her fear of losing her job, about the pressure to perform perfection, about how she had mistaken judgment for efficiency. When she apologized, it was not to the man alone, but to the room, to herself. To the version of who she had wanted to be when she first started. The man did not forgive loudly. He did not make a spectacle of mercy. He simply nodded, acknowledging the courage it took to face oneself honestly. He made it clear that accountability would follow, but it would be paired with growth, not shame. Training would change. Evaluation would change. Leadership would be redefined not by authority, but by the ability to protect dignity under pressure. This was not a threat. It was an invitation. As the meeting ended, something unexpected happened. People lingered. Conversations continued. Barriers softened. The hotel, for the first time in a long while, felt less like a machine and more like a community remembering its purpose. The man walked alone afterward. Through the lobby, past the same front desk, past the same marble floors. But now the space felt quieter, humbler, as if the building itself had exhaled. That evening, he returned to the window overlooking the city, watching lights flicker on one by one, each representing a life full of unseen stories. He knew change would not be instant. Habits rarely surrendered without resistance. But something fundamental had shifted. The mirror had been held up, and once people truly saw themselves, they could never unsee it. Tomorrow would reveal who chose to change and who chose to leave. The changes did not announce themselves with banners or speeches, yet they arrived unmistakably, like light seeping into a room that had been closed too long. In the days that followed, the hotel felt different in ways that could not be captured in reports or statistics. Voices softened. Pauses appeared where impatience once ruled. People began looking at one another not as obstacles or roles, but as individuals carrying invisible weights. The man watched quietly from the edges, still avoiding the executive office that bore his name, still walking the same corridors, still listening. He understood that real transformation was rarely loud, and that the truest tests came after the moment of realization. When no one was watching anymore, some chose to leave. A few supervisors resigned, unable or unwilling to unlearn habits that had protected their sense of control. There was no bitterness in their departure, no public shaming. Only a calm acceptance that this place was no longer aligned with how they wished to lead. Others surprised even themselves. The manager who had once dismissed him at the front desk began arriving early, staying late, learning names he had never bothered to learn before, correcting behavior not with authority but with example. The concierge, who had first judged by appearance, asked to be reassigned temporarily. Wanting to relearn her role from the ground up, she stood at the desk with a different posture now, not rigid, but open, her smile no longer a performance, but a reflection of attention. One evening, the same family returned. They entered hesitantly again, father holding his daughter's hand a little tighter this time, uncertainty still etched into their movements. The lobby had not changed physically, yet the atmosphere greeted them differently. Before they could hesitate, they were welcomed warmly, offered water, asked how their journey had been. No assumptions were made. No impatience surfaced. The little girl looked up at the chandelier again, but this time she smiled. The man watched from a distance, his chest tightening not with anger or disappointment, but with something close to relief. This was what the building had been meant for all along. On his final night, he asked for one last gathering. Not mandatory, not formal, simply an open invitation. Staff members filled the dining area again, some standing, some sitting, all listening. He spoke calmly, without rehearsed lines, without grandeur, his words shaped by sincerity rather than authority. He told them that ownership was not power, but responsibility. That wealth without empathy was simply decoration, and that the true measure of any place was how safe people felt being human inside it. He reminded them that guests would forget the marble floors and the chandeliers, but they would never forget how they were treated when they felt small. He did not announce rewards, yet promotions followed for those who embodied the values now taking root. He did not threaten consequences, yet accountability became natural, because people finally understood what they were protecting. When he finished speaking, there was no applause at first, only silence, heavy and reverent, before someone finally stood and said thank you, not to an owner, but to a person who had trusted them enough to tell the truth. Later that night, he returned to the lobby alone. The piano played softly again. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass. He placed his small bag by the door and looked around one last time, taking in the faces, the movements, the quiet confidence that had replaced fear. No one rushed him. No one watched nervously. They simply nodded, smiled, and continued their work, secure in the knowledge that dignity was no longer conditional here, as he stepped outside into the night, blending once more into anonymity. The hotel remained behind him, glowing not with luxury, but with something far rarer, humanity, and that was the real investment he had always been willing to make.